Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So first of all, thanks for being patient with me as I have taken a little bit of time away from the meetings with the new baby. I really appreciate that you guys have kept up with all the work and assignments and discussion board posts and all of that jazz. So now we're back on track, getting started with today. We'll continue on having our Tuesday 2:30 meetings every week and our optional Thursday meetings as well. So once again, thank you. I do appreciate your guys' patience with me. And that being said, before we jump into the PowerPoint, since it's been a while since we met, does anybody have any questions for me that we need to start out with? Okay, all right, then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're recording. So here we go. Okay, so three main things I want to talk about today, starting with thesis statements, introductions, and conclusions. And I know that you guys watched a video on that, but I want to kind of reiterate some of the points. And then, of course, our they say, I say reading and a revision checklist, which is a new concept, I suppose, that I'm introducing that I want to encourage you guys to use. So starting out with thesis statements. As you saw in the video, and lots of you guys posted about on the discussion board, this formula was new to you and it seemed widely appreciated. So the topic plus opinion plus what we could call the POS or point of significance. In other words, who cares or why should your reader care? So having that formula, I think, is so helpful, as well as knowing that a thesis statement can be more than one sentence. So do you guys have any additional comments or feedback? Or even sometimes I have students argue with me that it has to be one sentence. And I mean, if you feel that way, you can keep it one sentence. But I'm telling you, in the bigger world of academia, you can definitely have a multiple sentence thesis statement. So any feedback on that for me?
Well, I've heard that, this is Jose, by the way, good afternoon. I've heard that usually thesis statements are a paragraph.
Well, I think you could argue that an introduction paragraph, by and large, is kind of a thesis. And we're going to look at a couple of shorter introduction paragraphs that really kind of come together as making a complete thesis. But I wouldn't, well, in a longer paper, so like when I did my graduate school thesis, my thesis paper that was like 80 pages long, my thesis was a full paragraph. So it really, I guess, does depend on the length of your paper. If you're writing a 5-paragraph essay, you're probably going to have a 1-sentence thesis statement. But if you've got something longer, maybe 2 or 3 sentences, and something really longer, you might have a whole paragraph.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anything else on that? Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of sample thesis statements that really use this formula. And I just want to point out, I guess, the different parts of the formula so you can see how they work in different ways. So in this first one, it says, with more and more teens using smartphones and social media, cyberbullying is on the rise. Cyberbullying puts a lot of stress on many teens and can cause depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts. Parents should limit the usage of smartphones, monitor their children's online activity, and report any cyberbullying to school officials in order to combat this problem. So can someone jump in and identify the 3 parts of the thesis statement that we see here? So what is the topic? What is the writer's opinion? And what is the point of significance?
Mrs. McPherson,
Yes.
you want us to point out the main idea topics?
Sure, yeah, just the general topic of this thesis statement.
Oh, okay. The
So
rise of
parents,
cyberbullying?
I got a couple answers there, but I didn't quite hear any of them. Someone who jumped in, jump back in.
Me, Sandra. I was going to say where parents should limit. I think that's the writer's opinion because it's stating that parents should limit. So I think that's part of the thesis.
Yeah, yep,
Maybe.
exactly.
Oh,
So just to clarify, this entire paragraph that we're seeing here, all three sentences are the thesis statement. And you're right that parents should limit the usage is the writer's opinion. So that's one part of it. And what's the topic?
cyberbullying.
Yep, exactly. So cyberbullying is the topic. The writer's opinion is that parents should limit the usage of X, Y, and Z. And what's the point of significance? Like, why is this an important topic that the reader should care about?
Because of the stress and anxiety and depression of teens.
Exactly. So we're seeing and this is why I really wanted to show you guys this. We're not seeing everything in order of, right? If we go back here and look at topic plus opinion plus point of significance, it doesn't always have to go in order. Here we're seeing the topic coming up right away, smartphones, social media, or I'm sorry, cyberbullying is the topic. But then the point of significance is right here in the second sentence. And it's the third sentence where we see the writer's opinion. So don't feel that you have to limit yourself to being in the order that I presented the formula. You can put it in whatever order that you want, and it can still work really well. So looking at this next one, it's a little bit shorter. So 2 sentences. Studying abroad is one of the most culturally valuable experiences you can have in college. It is the only way to get completely immersed in another language and learn how other cultures and countries are different from your own. So someone, again, jump in and point out the topic and the writer's opinion and the point of significance.
Hi, this is April.
Hi, April.
Hi, so I think the topic would be studying abroad,
Yep,
and the writer's opinion would be him saying, or him or her saying that it's one of the most culturally valuable because it's subjective, and
exactly.
and then the last part, why it's important, is because you get to like learn about other cultures and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So this one actually follows the formula almost perfectly. The topic is studying abroad. The opinion is that it's the most culturally valuable experience. And the point of significance, again, the point of significance here is subjective. So it is part of the opinion. But we would say that it's the point of significance, the writer is saying, is that it's the only way to get completely immersed in another language. Awesome. So let's look at I think just one more here. Magazines have done a lot in the last 5 years to include a more diverse group of models, but there is still a long way to go to promote a healthy women's body image collectively as a culture. So same routine here. Someone can jump in and identify all 3 parts.
Okay, is promote healthy women's body image. That's the topic.
Yep. This one's a little bit trickier, so that's all right. Take your time. So we're still, and anybody can jump in. We're still looking for the opinion as well as what the point of significance is.
The point of significance is that the diverse group of models.
I would not say that that's the point of significance,
Okay.
actually. But thank you for saying something. You're the only one brave enough to attempt it, so I appreciate that.
Oh, you want the opinion, Mrs. McPherson?
Sure.
How about magazines? I've done a lot in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I would say that that's the writer's opinion, is that magazines have done a lot in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I agree.
And as we already said, promoting a healthy woman's body image, that's the topic. So what's the point of significance? Why is this important, this topic, and what the writer's saying?
To promote women in a healthier way.
So yes, it's essentially.
Yeah.
However, I would say if we look at the end of the sentence here, that's where the big clue is.
Oh yeah.
So it is about promoting women's body image in a healthy way, but collectively as a culture.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yep. So the point of significance is that there's still a long way to go as a culture to get this done.
Yes.
Thank you guys. Thanks for jumping in. I know that one was a little bit more tough, but it's important to look at these examples because sometimes, like we saw with the second one, it's cookie cutter, cut and dry. We can see those 3 parts of the formula. Other times it's out of order, and other times it's even trickier. Doesn't mean that it's not a good thesis statement. So as you guys start to, we're getting very near starting to work on our argument paper. I don't want you to limit yourselves when it comes to writing your thesis statement, because that's a really important part of your paper that everything kind of hinges on your thesis statement being really solid. Because from a reader's perspective, any reader, even if they don't know what they're looking for, they really are hoping to find something to hang on to in your introduction, something that they can grasp onto in their minds, and then they can keep rolling with that as they read your work. So this very last example, I want to talk about because it's missing a piece of the formula. So, and I'll tell you guys what it is. So this one says, studies have shown that the use of medical marijuana has been helpful to veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Medicinal marijuana prescriptions should be legal in all states and provided to these veterans. Additional medical or therapy services should also be researched and implemented in order to help them reintegrate back into civilian life. So the topic, I think, is pretty clear here. It's that medicinal marijuana should be, medicinal marijuana, period, in relation to veterans suffering from PTSD, right? So kind of a broader topic. And the writer's opinion is that it should be legal in all states and provided to these veterans. What this thesis statement is lacking is a really strong point of significance. There's a little bit of it here at the end of the last sentence where it says to help them reintegrate back into civilian life, but that's not strong enough of a point. There needs to be some type of idea presented that would let the reader know that if the veterans are unable to reintegrate back into civilian life, that could be a problem, or that there aren't other great options out there for them, or that the options that are available aren't working. So when we look at a topic like this that's pretty controversial, we have to make sure that the point of significance is fully developed. We can't just kind of toss something onto the end and call it the point of significance. It's got to let the reader know the bigger picture. So any questions about, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. So for each part, like topic, the opinion, and the point of significance, they don't necessarily have to be like just a sentence. They can be like the topic could be, well, I get the topic being like one sentence mainly, but like the point of significance, that doesn't have to necessarily be one sentence. That can be broken up into 2 sentences.
Definitely. That's a great question. And the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And it's the same with your opinion as well. Your opinion might take you 2 sentences to state your opinion because you might want to set it up first, and that's totally fine as well. One thing that shouldn't happen with a thesis statement, with these 3 parts of a thesis statement, is they shouldn't be broken up with other stuff in between them. Once you enter into your thesis statement, you want to have all 3 parts together, back to back. So they can be out of order, they can be interwoven, but you're not necessarily going to start your thesis statement and then interrupt it with some background information or a couple of statistics and then go back to your opinion. So you do want to keep it together. And usually it's located at the end of the first paragraph. And that doesn't always have to be the case, but for our purposes and in a, a beginning of your academic career course, I would say stick with leaving it at the end of that first paragraph because it's trickier to put it anywhere else. Any other questions or comments on thesis statements before we move on? Okay, so let's take a look at introductions, right? So your thesis statement is part of your introduction, but it's not your entire introduction. We've got to do a lot of other things in that first paragraph. And the first paragraph is key because that's when the reader decides if they want to bother keep reading. It's when they decide if they like you as a writer, if they agree with you, if they think you're smart, if they think that what you're writing about it has any value. So the introduction arguably is the most important part of your paper. And you've already got your thesis statement formula down. So now you want to work on the rest of it. And if you'll remember way back in the beginning of the semester, I shared with you my advice that you really have no business writing an introduction until you've written a good portion of your paper, because you don't know really what you're about to introduce until you've got something to introduce. So my formula, I guess you could say, for an introduction, once you've gotten a decent portion of your paper written, is 1, 2, 3, just like the thesis statement. So first, you're going to start with engaging your reader with a concise opening statement or a hook. Everybody's heard of starting with a hook, right? So something that really grabs your reader's attention, draws them in. That's one way to do it. You don't have to be super dramatic about it. That's why I started with just have a concise opening statement. That is just as effective. And a lot of times when you're trying for that hook, you go over the top and it's ineffective. It doesn't work that well. So if you don't have a really great hook right off the bat, don't push yourself to come up with something hugely entertaining or attention grabbing. Start with a simple, concise statement that represents your paper really well. And I'll show you an example of that. Second, in your introduction, that's when you really present your topic and provide some background on it. So not a whole bunch of background, maybe 2 to 3 sentences of background, enough to whet your reader's appetite for the topic and help them understand your thesis statement. So that's especially important to think about if you have a more complicated thesis statement. You can provide a little bit of, the breadcrumbs within the introduction in order to help your reader really get what you're trying to say. And then of course, part 3 is your thesis statement. So let's look at a sample introduction that contains all 3 of these items. And I used some highlighting to color code so that you guys could see really easily the 3 different parts. And this introduction and the second sample are both shorter. Yours probably will be longer than this, but I think this works well for our purposes. So this one says, much of our learning takes place outside the classroom. We know, so right there, actually, that first sentence, much of our learning takes place outside the classroom. That is a simple, concise opening statement. It's not crazy entertaining. I wouldn't call it a hook. It's just a clear, simple statement that lets the reader know what they're going to be reading about. And that's enough to get your reader's attention if they're interested in the topic, right? You're not going to make someone interested in something they don't care about because you've got a clever hook. So I personally find it more effective to start with these concise opening statements. So building on that, we learn how to maintain budgets, forge friendships, develop business relationships, and more. Now a little bit of background. Imagine extending those skills on a global level. We would immediately cease to believe the world only contains the people and things we can see, but rather a wide variety of opinions, customs, beliefs, and ethics. Now our thesis statement. This is why every college level student must study abroad during their undergraduate years. They will learn more in that semester abroad than in any other academic year. So simple formula here, the opening statement, a little bit of background on what's going to be argued in the thesis statement, and then the thesis statement. Questions about this example? Okay, so looking at this other one, does someone else want to volunteer to read this one?
I'll do it, Mrs. McPherson.
Okay, go right ahead. Thank you.
Every year, over 500 million people will become infected with malaria. with was that roughly
Yep.
80% of them living in sub-Saharan Africa. Malaria is an infectious disease caused by parasites that are transmitted to people through female
I have no idea how to say that. So
Anopheles mosquitoes. Nearly 500,000 people die of malaria every year, most of them young children under the age of 5. Unlike many other infectious diseases, the death toll for malaria is rising. While there have been many programs designed to improve access to malaria treatment, the best way to reduce the impact of malaria in sub-Saharan Africa is to focus on reducing the number of people who contract the disease in the first place, rather than waiting to treat the disease after the person is already infected.
awesome. Thank you. So this one I think is really clear cut when it comes to these three pieces. The reason that the yellow highlighted sentence is a hook is because we've got that percentage in there, right? And over 500 million people. So we've kind of got like a shocking statistic, and that would be considered a hook. Background on the topic, I mean, it's very clear. There's a definition of what malaria is and another statistic. So that's kind of very cookie cutter background. And then the thesis statement, which contains all three parts that it should. So think about this when you do go to work on your introduction, that you now have kind of a box that you can put around what an introduction should look like. So if you struggle with it a little bit, you know, come back to the different pieces and just try to work on each piece and then put the pieces together. And of course, I'm always happy to look at and sample at one of your introductions. If you want me to give you feedback on it, you can always just email me a paragraph and I'll give you some feedback. Questions on introductions before we jump into the next topic? My dog has questions. All right, so we're gonna take a look at conclusions. Conclusions were another thing that you guys kind of expressed some, I guess, some disbelief in the things that I told you in the video, as far as what a conclusion should and should not do. And I just want to, like I said, reiterate a little bit of that and give you guys a chance to ask questions if you have them. So this is a quick little run through of conclusions. We already know that the heart of your essay is in your thesis statement, which is in the introduction, and it should still be beating in the conclusion. I don't mean that you should repeat your thesis in the conclusion, and that's what I covered in the video. Basically, your thesis makes this statement that says, I'm going to argue that, or I'm going to prove X, Y, Z. And your conclusion is saying, so I proved this point. I argued X, Y, Z, and I proved it to you. So really, I would like to switch out this word argue with prove. And I think that's more effective. But you're not going to restate your thesis word for word or even re-paraphrase it, because over the course of your paper, the body of your work, it should have grown, right? Your thesis statement should have grown significantly over the course of your paper, and you have done more than just prove one sentence. So that's why we don't just repeat the thesis. And as it says here, the thesis establishes the direction of your essay, but then the conclusion makes it clear that you kept on track and did what you said you would. So this little paragraph, I think it's just an important way to picture this in your mind. Your introduction acts as a bridge, right? That transports your readers out of their own lives, kind of like Alice in Wonderland, right? So Alice is in her own life sitting underneath the tree, but then she goes down the rabbit hole. So she leaves her own life and she goes into Wonderland. In your case, your reader is leaving their own life momentarily, and they're going into the textual space of your essay. So they're putting everything else aside and they're just focusing on what you've written. And the introduction is what helps that happen. The conclusion, on the other hand, should provide a bridge back. So it helps your readers come back out of what you've written and into their life with something that's important enough to them to actually talk about. So if someone reads your paper and then puts it down and never thinks about it or reads it again, that's been pointless for you to have written that. So you want your conclusion to help your reader make a broader connection. And that means that you have to indicate why your topic has a broad significance, right? So in our thesis statement, we're saying this is why this is important. But in our conclusion, we're going even broader. We're giving them maybe 3 or 4 reasons why our topic was important, as well as what they learned about what our topic is important. I don't know why this is a little bit out of the sight. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So in order to accomplish this, there's 4 main elements. Summarize your essay, but not exactly, right? You're not going to say, first I talked about this, second I talked about that. You're going to get those key points, just the absolute highlights, and maybe there's just 2 of them. At the most, there's 3 or 4, and you're going to remind your reader of them. You're not going to repeat them exactly. You're just going to remind your reader of those points. Make a final appeal to the reader and encourage them to take action. So that action might be food for thought. It might just be asking them to think further about something. It might be asking them to change their mind. It might be asking them to actually get out in the world and vote on something or do something. It could take many different forms, action. It doesn't have to literally mean that they do something. Like I said, it could just be a thought process. If you're having trouble coming up with providing some food for thought, basically some content for them to take back into their life and talk about with somebody else to further the conversation, try starting with the word imagine. So, imagine if X, Y, and Z happened in our state of Indiana, or imagine if medicinal marijuana was legalized as a prescription for vets throughout America, right? So you can use that imagine if phrase to kind of help lead you into what you want your reader to leave your essay thinking about. Couple of other important concepts on conclusions. You do want to create new meaning. You've probably heard before that in a conclusion, you shouldn't present new information. And that's sort of true. You don't just want to start dropping big bombs in the last paragraph of your essay, but you can create new meaning. And the way that you do that is that you demonstrate how your ideas work together. So throughout the body of your paper, you're going to have these paragraphs that are making arguments, that are agreeing with others, that are disagreeing with others, and that are stating your own opinion. The conclusion is a point in time when you pull all of that together and you're saying, this is how all these individual pieces of the pie create one big picture. It's also really important in your conclusion to acknowledge limitations of your argument. There's no argument that's perfect. No matter what it is you're arguing or how strongly you believe in it, there are other opinions, and there is some validity to those opinions. If you refuse to acknowledge that, I guess you have the right to do that, but if you refuse to do that in a piece of writing, your reader will think you are biased. And that means that they will not take what you've written as seriously as they would if you acknowledge the validity and limitations of others. All right, almost at the end of this little section here. So a couple of techniques that you can use in your conclusion. Use emotion. An emotional appeal is one of the key ways that you can get a reader to care about your paper after they put it down. You can use a quotation. So, like a famous quotation that a famous person has made, something like that works really nice in the conclusion. You can also pull out a personal anecdote, and everybody was supposed to have picked a topic that they had a personal connection with. So the conclusion can be a good point to be really personal and share with the reader exactly why this was so important to you. And my main suggestion, end on a positive note. Gloom and doom don't usually win your reader over. They don't usually make them feel good about what they've read. So no matter what your topic is, end with a little bit of hope and optimism and positivity rather than going the other way. Last but not least, in conclusion, as I said in the video, do not use the phrase in conclusion to begin your last paragraph. You were coached to do this in elementary school and in high school, but in college level, really any type of college level course, you do not want to use that phrase. It's very trite, it's very elementary, and as it's written here, it doesn't really convey that you put a great deal of thought into this part of the essay. Instead of using in conclusion, I've got a couple of words that, let me come back here. Okay, so a couple of words that you can use instead. So for these reasons, comma, as a result of, altogether, overall, therefore, all of these words can replace in conclusion as a way to kick off your very last paragraph. I want to actually note that a conclusion can be 2 or 3 paragraphs. It doesn't just have to be one long paragraph. You can start to work your way into wrapping things up and winding down, and still need to break it up into multiple paragraphs. So don't feel limited, or don't feel like you have to have a conclusion that's 2 pages long because it takes you that long to say everything. Okay, questions or comments about conclusions?
Yes, Professor McPherson, I remember recently there's I think it was a discussion board question about conclusions, and I made a comment in particular because I'm in a public speaking class, and it's been emphasized for at least speaking to always mention in conclusion. And so I thought that maybe in writing, when you're summing up your whatever you're talking about, to insert in conclusion to give the cue that, hey, your essay or speaking rather could be done. But I remember you did post something on there in response about that. No, that's not necessary. And there, of course, is a difference between orally saying something and then just reading something, you know, in an essay.
Yeah, and it's a good point. So first and foremost, there is a difference between speaking and writing, and how people are paying attention when you are speaking to them versus when they're reading a piece of writing. Especially in the case of a longer speech, using the cue in conclusion is probably very important, because it lets people know, like, okay, we are actually at the end. On a personal level, I still think that it comes across as elementary. And I would rather use a phrase like, so now it's time to wrap things up, or now it's, let's take a few minutes here at the end to put all of this together. So if I just said that to you, let's take a few minutes here at the end to put this all together, I have signaled to you that we are now at the conclusion, right? Would you agree? Anybody?
Yes,
Thank
you're
you.
letting them know that you're at the end.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways, there's lots of verbal ways and ways in writing to signal a conclusion without saying in conclusion. Just like in an introduction, we wouldn't start by saying, I would like to start my paper by telling you that my topic is medicinal marijuana, right? Like, we don't start that way. We don't start a cover letter when we're applying for a job by saying, my name is Tiffany McPherson. Like, we don't start in the most obvious way, because it's just not advanced enough at this level of writing, my opinion. But if your speech teacher is telling you to use that as a signal phrase, then use it. Don't lose points on my account.
No, that's fair enough. I think I appreciate the difference, because obviously that's another class, but I just wanted to sort of extend another idea pertaining to the phrase in conclusion. I think that also, as you said, Professor, there are other ways to conclude a paragraph besides using in conclusion. So that's I find that to be very helpful for my writing. So thank you.
You're welcome, and I'm glad for the question. I appreciate that you put that on the discussion board and that you asked it here too. All right, so a couple more things to get through here. They say, I say. I suspect a great majority of you have not completed this reading, only because only 5 of you had posted on the discussion board. Earlier today, the due date was today at noon. So you can still post on the discussion board, I'll still give you credit for it. But I wanted to share the reason why I assigned this chapter is because as you guys are doing ongoing research for your topics, and you've already found several sources, and now I'm asking you to find more sources for the exploratory essay, and then even more sources when we start the actual argument essay. Some of the texts that you find to read as sources might be more complicated. Excuse me. So I wanted you to have a little bit more insight, I guess, on how to interpret them. And also because this chapter in the book talks about how it can be so difficult sometimes to understand if a writer is summarizing someone else's idea or sharing their own idea. I do not want you guys to do that in your writing. When you have to work really, really hard to figure out if it's the writer's opinion or someone else's opinion, that's not fun as a reader. And it's actually very difficult as your teacher for me to understand or to figure out if you're writing correctly, right? Because if you're sharing someone else's idea without citing it, that even unintentionally can be plagiarism. And for me, my job is to make sure you don't do that accidentally, especially in another class when you could get called out on it, and whatever the consequences may be, they're never good. So you do have to be very careful about making sure that it's super clear when you are using your voice versus when you are sharing someone else's voice. That being said, do you guys have any thoughts on this particular reading that you want to share here in the meeting? Okay, I'm not going to push you guys on this one because, like I said, I think that not too many people got the reading done. Keep in mind that this is kind of the pattern that we'll follow for the rest of the Tuesday meetings. I'll usually assign reading, and then I'll want you to post it on the discussion board prior to our meeting so that I can ensure everyone read it and we can have a discussion. And of course, so I can do this, right? So I can gather some of our thoughts from the discussion board, just a few for today's, since we didn't have a lot of posts, but both Ashley and Lorena shared a little bit from the chapter about reading between the lines. So we are the ones who have to read between the lines to decipher what message is being relayed to us and why. And simply stated by Lorena, you have to read between the lines. So I think that was kind of a key point of the chapter. And the other comment here is from April. And she said that the one I found most useful is when the author said, to understand difficult passages of this kind, you need to translate them into your own words. And so that was another highlight of the chapter as well that I thought was really important. And it's a technique I definitely use when I struggle with understanding content. I try to rewrite it or retype it usually. And that forces you, when you do that, when you try to rephrase or restate something, it forces you to understand it. It's really strange. Like you can't, like you just can't get through restating something without gaining an understanding. So it's a really helpful technique if you're reading a source that you're struggling with understanding. So thank you, Ashley, Lorena, and April. Do you guys want to add anything to those comments that you shared on the discussion board? Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. So last thing here before we do the Zoom credit, the Zoom writing credit. So this is an example of a revision checklist, and it's really my revision checklist. The idea is that you would have a Microsoft Word document with a list of items that you would use after you're done writing your paper. So like you're done and you're ready to turn it in, but you stop and you go through this checklist and you make sure that you can check off everything on the list. So mine is pretty short, but I'm a fairly practiced writer. When I first started having a revision checklist, I had like 35 items on it. So when you make up your own revision checklist, you can steal all of these from me because they're all really relevant to what you guys are doing, but you probably should have more items. So I always look at the opening line and make sure that it's short and concise and that it's interesting. I look at my thesis statement. I look at transitions between paragraphs, and we talked about those in an earlier meeting. I look at all my topic sentences, which are the same as the transitions, but I look at them through different lens, right? When on one go through, I look and make sure that the end sentence of one paragraph ties in nicely with the beginning sentence of another paragraph for a transition. And then I also make sure the first sentence of every paragraph is a good topic sentence for that paragraph, which goes hand in hand with making sure that each paragraph is really focused, that I don't have 6 different main ideas going on in one paragraph. And if I do, then I pull those paragraphs apart. So that becomes part of my revision work. I make sure that the overall organization makes sense. And sometimes I do that backwards outline that we talked about. So once your paper is already written, you go back through, and if your topic sentences are good, then you can just pull out the topic sentences and you should be able to read through them, and that should be a really nicely organized outline. And that means that your organization does make sense. If it doesn't, then you might need to switch around the paragraph order. No stones left unturned. For me, that just means that I didn't leave any questions unanswered, or that I didn't forget to explain or define any important concepts or words. And then I look and make sure that I have a conclusion, that my goal is always to make the reader wish that there was another page or several more pages, just they don't want to be done, right? So that's my goal for a conclusion. And then some nuts and bolts, really more proofing or polishing or editing. I make sure that all my citations are correctly formatted and that my quotes are correctly formatted, and looking for spelling and punctuation. So these are kind of very last things that I look at. So I'm not requiring you to make a revision checklist, but I strongly encourage you to make one and keep it as a document on your computer so that you can add to it over, the years of your college career, because you're going to have to write a lot of papers. It's really helpful, and it will probably boost your scores on your papers if you take the time to go through and actually revise based on your checklist. There's also a discussion question for this week that if you do make your own revision checklist, you can share it and earn up to 5 extra credit points. This is the only extra credit opportunity in the course. So if you want to take advantage of it, that's all you have to do. You can't just copy this one. Yours needs to be significantly different or expanded upon in order to earn the 5 points. Any questions at all about any of the content that we covered? And if not, you can go ahead and move on to completing the Zoom credit. So as usual, if you can submit that like within the next hour or so by 4:30, that's great. So this time I'm asking you just to do 3 to 5 sentences where you pretend that you're talking to someone who doesn't know a single thing about the topic you're writing about, nothing, like they've never even heard of this topic, and explain the basics to them without bias. So you're not making your argument, you're not saying anything is good or bad, you're just explaining the basics or the background in just 3 to 5 sentences. This is actually kind of priming you for having a little bit of background content for your eventual introduction to your argument paper. So remember, I don't grade these, like as long as you turn in 3 to 5 sentences about your topic, you're going to get the credit. So I'm not expecting that you spend any great amount of time on this. Just free write 3 to 5 sentences that effectively explain your topic without bias. And Kalia asked, can you do a dialogue? Sure. I'm not even sure I understand that question. I like a back and forthing dialogue, whatever it is. Sure. Try it. I'm happy to let you guys explore and do more creative things. So yep, however you're interpreting this and you want to do it, you can do it. And that is the end of the PowerPoint, everybody. So with that being said, I'm going to hop back over into the chat. I realize I forgot my participation question, but that's okay. And I did not miss any questions. So if you don't have a question for me, you can leave. And if you do, hang around and I'll wait until everybody's left.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.
You too.
Thank you.
Well, I sent you my topic. I mean, I sent you my question in the chat, and I don't know.
No, I saw. I was gonna type back, but I
Yeah,
can answer. No, you're fine. You
Yeah.
can leave your topic. It doesn't necessarily have to be super personal, as long as you feel
Mhm.
engaged with it and you're truly interested in it. I don't want you to spend the next 6 weeks writing about and thinking about something that you don't care about. So as long as you're interested, then that's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Ashley. I was just wondering, is the topic the same that we're going with for this, the paper that we have to turn in by Sunday?
For the exploratory essay?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to clarify.
You're welcome, not a problem.
Professor.
Yes,
So my thing, it changed. They changed it. It's the 21st through the 28th. So
okay.
those assignments due those days.
Let me take a look here, Christian.
Okay.
The 24th through the 28th
Oh,
of
the
this,
21st.
oh, 21st,
Yes.
of this month, right?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, so that's week 10. So there's gonna be just, before it was week 11, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It should just be 3 discussion questions. I'm trying to, you know what, let me email myself and I will double check exactly what it's gonna be, and then I'll email you again so that you know what you'll miss and what you need to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so yep, I will get back to you on that later today or tomorrow.
All right. Affirmative.
Okay, thank you.